Hey YouTube, Doc's Motorcycle Service. Glad you were following along with us on this great adventure. If you watched the previous video, you'll know that we're working on a 1986 Heritage Softail, an FLST, commonly referred to as Hot Donna. And she's a really cool bike, but as mentioned in the previous video, she came to us with some problems, and we were working through those problems at a steady pace. We were sort of doing what we needed to do to the bike to keep it running, and then messing with it during the winter months, so we would have it available for the riding summer months. Now, don't get on my ass about this, but this bike is not conducive for cold weather. It doesn't have a fairing, it doesn't have a windshield, and to be completely honest, she was somewhat unreliable. So we were staging ourselves and preparing ourselves to start working on making her more reliable. And as mentioned in the previous video, we had a situation that developed, and at that moment, with the COVID and everything being closed, it only seemed like a natural idea to go ahead and start all these updatings and modifications, and one thing turned into another one, and it's pretty darn close to a full-blown restoration now, and we're well into that. As I mentioned in the previous video, Hot Donna Stripped Down. Oh, and don't forget to check out my Ultimate Seat review that's up and published now for a review of the Ultimate Seats and how they install, unboxing, reviewing, and how they ride. So check out that video as well. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about what's in the garage, all the parts off the bike. We're not going to go into detail about all of them, but we're just going to take a brief look at them, and then we're going to move on to the frame. You know, the frame is like your skeletal system for your body. If you did not have a skeletal system in your body, your muscles, your organs, everything else would just, you would be a blob. And your frame, your working system is only as strong as your frame is. So let me talk about that for just a moment. So the frame of the bike, anytime you start this thing, you tear it down to nothing, everything that you're putting back onto it is only going to work as good as the frame it's mounted to. If the frame has a weak spot, a busted weld, wallowed out bolt holes that allow things to tighten up but not completely be tight, that's a weak link. So when we started down this endeavor, we had to decide whether or not we wanted to paint the frame and whether or not we wanted to do it with rattle can. Now, I ain't gonna lie to you, I'm a rattle can magician, boy. I can make some stuff look good with a rattle can. But talking with people, and this is probably a tech tip here that I'm going to give you. If you're doing this yourself, be nice, be polite, and be attentive. But search out those people who can share their wealth of information with you. You can get this information from a local motorcycle shop, local motorcycle repair shop, a local dealership, a hole in the wall, fly by the seat of their pants, shade tree mechanic. All these guys have useful information, and if you approach them the right way, and if you're polite and attentive, and they see that in you, they'll spend a little time with you and they'll teach you some stuff. But always be appreciative of their time. Don't go interrupt them during their work days or their busy times. If you got a question and you roll into their shop and you see they're elbow deep in something, just stand back or offer to help. I mean, everybody can be a certified wrench passer, right? Linda's a certified wrench passer. I say that because she's not here. She'd beat my butt if she heard that. But you know, dig around, find people who truly know what they're doing, and then solicit their help from you. Don't pester them every day with stuff and go by their shop every day. And don't be afraid to start it yourself. Like, for example, don't walk into one of these guys' shops and go, hey man, I'm trying to take the stator off of whatever, and what's the first step? Okay, they're not going to hold your hand and walk you all the way through this, and that's not the way to come off to people when you want their help. You want their help, you don't want them to do it for you. Get your shop manual on every motorcycle that you have. Get a good shop manual. And the way to find out a good shop manual, I know, Facebook. Get on Facebook. Go to some of these groups that Facebook has, whether it's Heritage Softails, or whether it's Dynas, or whether it's Evos, or whether it's Ultra Classics. Go into these places, and again, don't be a pest. Don't go and ask a question that probably gets asked 19 times a day. Use the search function, use keywords, see if this has been discussed, and then tag on to some of those and ask questions. It's better to go to a guy who makes his living turning wrenches and say, hey, look, I was trying to take the stator out on this bike. I've got the outer primary off, the inner primary is right there. I've got it exposed, but I just can't figure out, I got the nuts out of it, I just can't figure out how to get it off. How would you get it off? Listen to what they tell you. Also, here's you another tech tip. Keep in mind, a lot of times that the tools that you'll use on a motorcycle are the same tools that you'll use on a car. Now, they might not be designed for the same function, but they can be adapted. For example, during this process, we had to get the front pulley off of the crankshaft spline. How in the hell were we going to do that? Well, what I figured out was by using a harmonic balancing tool that I rented from AutoZone, or excuse me, O'Reilly's. I could adapt it with longer bolts that I bought from the hardware store, matched up the threads, went in, pulled it right off, took it back, got my money back. It didn't cost me a thing to rent it. All right, so there's another tech tip. So anyway, getting back to the frame, if it's an old bike, you're going to have to decide whether or not you want it powder coated or whether or not you want it painted. And you need to decide your level of expertise when it comes to painting stuff. Like I said, I'm a rattle can master. I've airbrushed for 10 years, but I'm not going to try to airbrush a frame on a motorcycle. It would take forever and a day. And the equipment that I have to airbrush with is not going to operate a big paint gun. And I'm not going to go out and spend $500 or $600 on a reservoir air compressor tank and a paint gun and all these other things to paint a frame one time. So a couple of guys that I were chatting with said, hey, why don't you have it powder coated? I was like, never thought about that. Really never have had anything powder coated. So took a couple days, I dug into that, found out about powder coat, reached out to a couple powder coaters in my area, found one that had great reviews, found one that was known in the community, reached out to them, found out that we can get the frame powder coated for about $250. But they didn't have a vat big enough to dip the entire frame in to clean it. So they said, well, one of two things are going to have to happen. You're going to have to clean it. Right there, you are going to have to clean it, or we're going to have to charge you extra to clean it. And I was like, okay, so how are you going to clean it? And they said, basically, we would sandblast it. And I said, that's going to be an additional cost. And they were like, yeah. So I said, all right, well, let me look into this. So I, again, went to those people that I respect and talked to. And we're going to get to the frame here in just a second after the tour of the garage. And we're going to look at some materials that I purchased, and some that worked and some that didn't work. Well, some that worked, but some that worked better. All right, so here's the frame. We'll come back to that in a minute. Over here's the front wheel. Got the fender protected with a towel in case we drop anything on it. I guess that would be a tech tip as well. Remember, anytime you're working around anything that's metal and you're working above your paint job, always take steps to protect that. Got what's left of the forks right there. Over here is just a quick pan of the garage, the lift, and some stuff that we got off the bike. This piece here, right here, is the bottom of the triple tree. This is called the stem, and this is the stem assembly. And these two holes right here are what those forks pass through over there. We got the timing cover here, or not the timing cover, but the camshaft cover. We got the oil tank, and as you can see, the oil tank it's in pretty good shape, but it's got some bad spots on it, especially up here. A lot of rust, a lot of corrosion from where the battery sits in there. Took that by the chromer this morning with a lot of other stuff. I'll show you some pics here, pop-up pics of that. And he had me bring it back for that reason right there. For this thing to go into his vat, it has to be almost completely clean of motor oil. If not, it'll mess up his machine. So we're going to take some kerosene, we're going to clean it up and move on down the way. Moving along over here, we have what's left of the shocks for the 86 and the reservoirs. Interestingly enough, on this model, the air reservoir was not in the shock. So as you take those off and you check them, everything that you take off of a bike, you should check. I noted that they were still working well, because when I loosened I actually took them off from the front first. They lay into the motorcycle like this, with these adjustments in the back. And these are your adjustment, whatever you want to call them, adjustment nuts. We'll go into that more later. Reservoirs lay into this piece, which goes in between the rear of your frame back here at the pivot point for the swing arm, and the swing arm got dropped off at the chromers as well. Over here is what's the speedo, your instrument lights, your ignition switch and key switch, and as you can see this needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Goes all the way back down to 2 looms, L-O-O-M-S, which goes into your terminal block or junction block, what have you, and then everything comes out of there. Matter of fact, this goes to the right handlebar and this goes to the left handlebar. This goes down to your starter, your coil, your transmission neutral switch right here, and then this is the wire that goes to the rear fender lights. And I don't know where the other piece is, but I cut it, and the reason I went ahead and cut it was because the rear tire had been rubbing that harness. So moving over to here, let's see what we got. We got the transmission that came out, and again you'll notice that I have the clutch cable put still on this here. Don't try to bend these things too tight. Make them in big loops. Try to keep them together with zip ties. I love zip ties. The oil cooler, as we mentioned in the previous video, here is the old magneto and the magnetic coil and the voltage regulator that seemed to be the problem. As we mentioned in the first video, it looks like oil got in there and caused that to short out. Rear master cylinder, all nice and cleaned up, ready for a rebuild. I mean, you know, when you're working on an old bike and you're restoring it, everything comes down to how much money you got. This master cylinder was working great. I will probably have it chromed. I can probably have this thing chromed cheaper than I can buying a new chromed master cylinder. This is the hasp that held on the reservoirs for the shocks. These were the stem bearing caps. And as you can see, the bearing in that was pretty much ready to be replaced. These two caps, although I can't show them to you very well, keep in mind looking at the frame is upside down. This is the neck of the frame, and your neck caps stick in like this and like that. And you have bearings in here, and the lower bearing helps the turn with the forks, and the upper bearing helps the turn with the handlebars. Moving back over here, here's your riser that holds your handlebars on. Starter gear for the starter. We talked about this before, and you'll see more of it as we go through it. This is the inside of the inner primary, and if you look at it from its proper point of view, you'll see that the previous owner had chopped this out and chopped this out to allow the belt drive, which is all this stuff underneath it, to function and replace the clutch chain. So we got the clutch plates over there, and actually this is the drive belt that goes from the back of the transmission pulley to the cog on the wheel, brake pedal, kickstand, axle bolt, your hardware that goes in with the mounting of your jiffy stand, oil filter and mount, toe and heel shifters over there, and over here we've got the dash pad, mounting hardware, got your 210s for the gas tank, horn, S&S carburetor mount, filter and chrome cover, floorboards, starter solenoid, handlebar controls, all kinds of stuff. But I do want to give you another tech tip now. As you look around right here and right here and 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 here, you're going to see a lot of these. Big believer, and as you take something off, put it in a Ziploc bag and name it what you would call it. For example, I don't know if you can read this, but this is carburetor lower mounting bracket. This is rear fender frame inner bolts. So when I get to the rear frame and I'm ready to reattach it, guess what? I know where the bolts are. Down here we've got the handlebars, mirrors, the top riser, or the top of the triple tree, along with cables for the carburetor. So that's pretty much the tour of the garage and what we're working on. So let's go ahead and talk about what we're doing.